Will Paul George playing in the preseason game be the deciding factor if he will be the perfect fit for the Philadelphia 76ers? The day is here where he will finally put on that uniform, and everybody's looking forward to it.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. You are Locked On with the Philadelphia 76ers. My name is Kayla Santiago, covering the Delaware Bluecoats as their sideline reporter of the Philadelphia 76ers G League team. Then, of course, here with Keith Pompey, each and every day, writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, covering all things Sixers all the time. Thanks for making Sixers your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now. So Paul George is expected to play in this preseason game coming up for the Philadelphia 76ers. Will this determine if he's going to be a perfect fit for this team, or is there still more time? Now, I understand that Joel Embiid is not going to be playing, but to me, this is definitely going to be a deciding factor if he fits with this team. And I'm not saying that, he absolutely needs to click right now, but is he going to do the little things? Will he not be selfish with the basketball? Will he be selfish when he needs to be? Because I'm looking at the play of him and Tyrese Maxey. Keith, clearly Paul George has a lot of time to fit in with this team, but what are you really looking at as he gets ready to gear up and be in a Sixers uniform?
I think it's me personally, I want to see, again, I do want to see how he coexists. But when I talked to him, Thursday, it was one of those things where he basically came out and said, right now it's more so about conditioning, right? Mm-hmm. He's really trying to blow out his lungs, run the floor, do all the intangible stuff. He says, I think the talent, it will take his imprint as the season goes along and we get, out of the preseason. So more so, I'll be, in this game, but he'll be keeping up with, Maxey, running the floor, doing stuff like that. So when I hear that, it's basically like, you know what? Maxey's going to be the guy this year, or at least he's going to be the guy during the preseason. Right now it's more about him just getting back in shape and doing whatever he can to help the team. So I think that when we talk about him fitting in and becoming a perfect fit, it seems like he's going to go out of his way to become the perfect fit, especially early on, right? So I while this is important, yes, it is an important step. It's really hard to gauge how everything is going to work out until they have him, Maxey, and Embiid on the floor together.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I like that you bring up the conditioning piece, because not only does Tyrese Maxey like to run the floor, but they especially like to run the floor if Joel Embiid is not in the lineup. And that's not a knock on Joel Embiid at all. But they do play a little bit slower when Joel Embiid is in the game. They wait till he gets back. If he's not Tyrese Maxey, just zoom in across the court. He's so athletic. He's so quick. And Paul George is going to have to keep up with that. Now, I do agree to disagree that you're going to see the fit right now not fully without Joel Embiid. Yes, of course, that is true in some aspect. But no matter what, Joel Embiid is going to get the ball at all times. Paul George already expecting that, right? The real fit to me is figuring out, okay, how are they going to kind of give and go with Tyrese Maxey and being able to do those little things? If it's Kayla Martin's night, is that going to be a way for Paul George to maybe back off and dive after the loose balls or go after that? Now, that's more of Kayla Martin's style and his game, but where is PG going to fit in terms of all that? Yes, of course it's true. You're never going to know until everybody's healthy and everybody's out on the floor at the same time. But I do think there's an opportunity here to see how he fits in, especially with the guards, seeing the bench pieces that come in, like a guy like Eric Gordon, Kyle Lowry coming into, and other pieces of the puzzle that you can see where Paul George really fits. Now, will we see him a lot throughout this preseason game? I'm not really sure. He's trying to get that conditioning up, but I'm excited, Keith. I mean, we've been waiting for this. This is something that we've been looking forward to, and I'm definitely going to take a look at this game and give him a little bit of grace. It's his first game of the season, getting back into that game shape, but also he's a veteran. He's been there before. He's been through this before. So I'm looking forward to see his impact in this preseason game and how he can kind of work around playing with a star like Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I give you that. Now, here's the deal, though. When it comes down to how do they fit in, there's a song used to be by Ludacris, Move B, Get Out the Way, Get Out the Way, B, Get Out the Way. If you're not Tyrese Maxey or Joel Embiid, that's what you got to do. Get out the way when it comes down to Paul George, because it's kind of like, it's like, we're looking at three max players, Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre. You can name anyone else. When it comes down to it, Paul George is an option over them, right? And he's going.
Right.
So I don't think, he has to worry about it. But the one thing that I'm a little bit concerned with is, it's just right now, it's like, and I get it, Paul just seems like he's really, really concerned with fitting in. Like, I want to make sure that I can fit in with Maxey. I want to do this. I want to do that. That's great. That's everything. You got the money. You're doing this. But he is a 9-time All-Star, the only 9-time All-Star on the team. So what they have to do is, like, and I understand how you want to see it, but what they have to do is they have to come to a balance, because he's a 9-time All-Star for a reason. He can't always be deferring to people and worrying about if he's fitting in. So, I understand it. I get it. But at the same time, I want to see Paul be aggressive. Today after practice, him and Maxey were doing drills, and they were phenomenal. Both of them. Both of them. Paul looked really good. So you see the skill set. So when I keep hearing like, oh, yeah, I want to, defer, I want to fit in, I want to be selfless, I want to be this and that. Nah, bro, you're going to have to step up from time to time. So that's something that they really got to figure out.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up, because you look in recent history with stars that came into Philadelphia, even somebody like James Harden, I feel like he came in and not necessarily wanting to fit in, but there was a lot of games where I'm like, James, why don't you just pull back and take the step back free? Why are you passing it so much? I appreciate you trying to get everybody involved, but also you are this fantastic shooter. You can still dribble and drive. Why are you being so passive in this moment? Another guy you look at too, and it's not as superstar level as James Harden and Paul George, is Tobias Harris. His mindset was always to fit in. He got paid like a max player, and all he did was fit in under the radar consistently and never got really a chance to shine. And part of that was his own fault. Part of that is how he was utilized too. But at the same time, Keith, if any coach can make this work, and if any coach can do this for Paul George, it's going to be Nick Nurse. But Paul George is a grown man, so he needs to also be the one that wants to go out there and take over when he needs to, because you don't want to get too passive. That's never going to work. It hasn't worked in recent history. And yes, you have Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, but it takes more than two guys to win a lot of games in the NBA.
Yeah, a whole lot more, especially when we talk about how much they get paid. And see, here's the thing. People forget, even when we go back to Jimmy Butler, even when Jimmy first arrived, there was games where Jimmy had 1 point, 3 points, 5 points. And what was it? He was focused on fitting in too much. Now, I'm not talking about in the playoffs where he started deferring and the team start winning, when he was facilitating. I'm talking about when Ben Simmons had the ball and he was off in the corner and he wasn't involved in the offense. They can't afford that to happen with PG. Now, I get it. You got Maxey, you want him to show up, to excel, Embiid. But the thing is, PG has the most experience. He's had the best career thus far. Well, Embiid made MVP. He didn't. So you could give Embiid him that. But as far as longevity, most game played, most big moments, it has been Paul George. So they got to figure it out.
That they do, and all these other stars too, and Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, those guys also have to be okay with maybe not averaging these high averages that they've had in previous years, especially Joel Embiid. And this is where it's really going to kick in when he says, I don't care about all NBA teams. I don't care about MVP. I don't care about scoring titles. If you really don't care, I'm not saying that you only can have 21 to 25 points a game, but there's going to be some games where it's just not working for you. You're getting double teamed every time. You're turning the ball over like crazy, and PG's going to need to come in and maybe have a 30 to 35 piece. So Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid also have to be accepting of understanding their roles during those times if they don't have the hot hand. Speaking of Joel, we're going to touch on him if we're worried or not coming up. There's a lot of concerns right now. He's barely even practiced, hasn't been able to practice with the team, and he definitely isn't playing in preseason as of right now. So we're going to touch on that in just a bit. But talking about all of these teams, the Sixers and Phillies, there's seriously nothing better than seeing these squads in person, in playoff atmosphere, regular season, whatever that may be. There's no better feeling than it at all. And there's a super deal going on right now on Gametime that you won't want to miss. So some of the top NFL teams right now, the most exciting, you could even say, the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders. We've been talking about this game before, that you have to go out and get to watch it. So Gametime is the best way to do that. Jaden Daniels has been on a tear. The Ravens just won big in thrilling fashion to the Bengals last week. And if you want to experience this live in the lower end zone, you still can with Gametime's super deal. $149, that section, row 7 for $489, the top 1% value. Another great deal, thanks to Gametime, is at the upper sideline, and you get $11 off. There are so many amazing deals on Gametime that you don't want to miss. What's better than to watch a game with Gametime deals? Absolutely nothing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDONNBA. You won't want to miss it for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is a Gametime. And it is about time that we figure out what the heck is going on with Joel Embiid. So, Keith, he is so injury prone sometimes. He's so dominant sometimes. You never really know what's going on. He has a knee assessment now. Stories are coming out. And this is the thing. You see this thing right behind me, Team USA, okay? Joel Embiid plays on that team. And immediately I said, I do not want to see that, because what's going to happen is something's going to happen. Not great. He's going to get injured. He's going to be banged up for the regular season. I wanted him to take the Kawhi Leonard route, which I think he should take all season long for load management if he doesn't get fined too much this year with the change of rule. But Keith, just what is going on with Joel right now? This is a guy that you need to rely on. And I understand they're taking their time. But once again, we talk about Paul George fitting in. Joel Embiid, when he comes in, it greatly changes the speed of the game. It changes how they play. You're adding another prolific scorer. What's happening here?
Yeah, it's crazy what happened, right? So the thing is, if let's just say if you just take the Olympics out, there was no Olympics, and we saw Joel do what he did last year. We saw him lose weight, you know what I mean, after the season. And they'll say, hey, you know what? We want to take it slow. We have a scheduled assessment on his knee. That's the reason why he's not here. I think more people would be like, okay, well, you know, everything is getting together. We know he's been relaxing, and maybe there was a scheduled meeting. But then when you see him play in the Olympics, like you said, and then the coach comes out and they're in Des Moines, Iowa, and he's not even with the team. Like, no one expected him to play, but he's not even with the team. And when the coach is asked, is he going to join the team at one point on his road trip, and he comes out and says he's not here, he's at a scheduled assessment of his knee. That was always on his schedule. We are still waiting for what's next. So what does that mean? Like, okay, now he has to get his knee evaluated, and now they'll tell us how we can continue the ramp up phase and what he can do. Now, maybe he will be able to play on this road trip. But the thing is, the optics look bad because, well, if he can't play now and you're worrying about what's next, why was he playing in the Olympics? Did he re-injure it in the Olympics? what's really going on. Because the thing is, you and I know these preseason schedules come out a long time ago, right? Where they get it figured out. And you realize that having an assessment scheduled the day before a preseason game, could lead to people wonder. Now, it could be everything could be factual, everything could be the way they're saying it is, but at the same time, it leaves a level of doubt.
It's really, really tough when you look at it. Listen, I understand the injuries, and I understand that Joel Embiid is in his prime. It's time to win now. He's a dominant player. But what you look at here is, are you worried or are you not? And I am worried because this is another year that the Philadelphia 76ers are revolving this team around him. And we've talked about this. Tyrese Maxey, of course, is going to evolve into this great superstar. And he's going to be the player that the Sixers center around for years to come when Joel Embiid's no longer in his prime. But right now, it is Joel Embiid. And they are adding so many pieces to make this work. And every single year I say, well, he's injured in the playoffs. He wasn't playing 100%. Those excuses are no longer, because if the same thing happens again, you can look at the organization maybe, but then you have to look at the direct source, and you have to look at Joel Embiid at this point, because right now, I get it. He's a competitor, and everybody in this league is. They want to play no matter what. You're always told, especially when you play sports from a young age, and I know he's only been playing basketball when he was 16, but still, when you look at it, you always hear coaches saying, well, just play through the pain. Just play through the pain. You got it. I understand that completely, but at the same time, this is the NBA. This is another grown man we're talking about. He needs to take care of his body a little bit better, and he didn't have the Jason Tatum treatment in the Olympics either. He played a good amount of time in the Olympics, and he looked good in the Olympics, and now all of a sudden it's, well, this knee is an issue. So yes, I'm going to be worried if I don't see him at least in one preseason game and don't see him in the opener, because I don't think he needs to play in the preseason, but I think you need to put him in there to go along with this new team and figure out where he's going to fit in, how he's going to get used to these guys. I'm not asking them to play him at all times, but at the same time, Keith, you need to start seeing those pieces of the puzzle really come together, and he is the centerpiece of it all.
You're right, because there was times last year where they brought him along slowly last year as well, but he did more at this stage of the game in practices and everything like that than he's doing now. So, again, I was high initially on him playing in the Olympics, but then when I saw him play and things like that, I came to a point where I was like, maybe he would have been better off, just resting at home, preparing for the season, because this is a huge season right now, a huge season.
I think this could be telling of his career, because Paul George isn't necessarily in his prime either, people. We're not, this is a team that's built to win now, and this organization is finally putting the pieces together. And I know it's the National Basketball Association. People are going to get hurt. This is what happens. It's sports. I know that. But at the same time, this is happening year after year. They haven't been successful out of the second round since Allen Iverson. I was 1 year old when that happened. It's been a really, really, really long time, people. This is telling, not for the Sixers, but also for Joel Embiid. He just got paid to stay and sign that extension. So, Keith, I agree with you. I mean, I'm worried here. I am. And I'm not going to be not worried until I see him out on that court, no matter what they say. Because at the end of the day, yes, I do agree with him not playing so many games early on and maybe holding him off, but you can't just bring him in the middle of the season and expect him to be all good. I feel like that's even worse to maybe cause an injury when all these other guys are already in that midseason form. Now, that's probably not going to happen, but just throwing theories out there to see that this is a serious year for Joel Embiid to prove that he can bring this organization and team to the next level.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%. It's serious. And, it's just a lot on the line right now, for them. Like you said, they're not old. I mean, excuse me, they're not old, but they're old in basketball terms. And both of these guys are coming off of, health issues in the past. So we'll see. Now, Paul George was healthy last year, but, before that, he was a guy just like Embiid who's always hampered by injury. So the time is now that all three of them getting paid royally. So it's all about Embiid's health.
Let's just hope that the injury bug stays away from this team and that he starts playing some basketball and that we can stop worrying a little bit and make sure that we can actually just watch this team and analyze this team and how it's all going to work. It's all a wait and see game right now. But what we're going to talk about coming up is Nick Nurse returning to the place where you could say he's a legend a little bit from home where he'll be. Nick Nurse has a fantastic story, not just as a coach, but what he's been able to do throughout his athletic career and not just in basketball. So that's going to be so much fun to talk about in just a bit. But first, hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And there's so many games to look out for here. We've been talking about so many throughout the week as well. We just said that, you all should go and try to check out this Sunday game happening. Well, there's also fantastic lines set out for that game as well. So Sunday at 1 p.m., it's two red-hot teams in the Washington Commanders and the Baltimore Ravens. Going into that contest, the Ravens are 6.5-point favorites. Both teams have been so excited to watch. So if you think that the Baltimore Ravens are going to pull it out and you want a little bit of moolah, make sure you go to FanDuel right now, FanDuel.com, and head over to place your bets. America's #1 sports book. Be sure to visit FanDuel to place all of your sports bet. No better place than FanDuel to do so. All right, so Nick Nurse, a little bit of a homecoming coming up here as they go on the road for this preseason game coming up this weekend and on Friday as well. So, Keith, so many fantastic storylines to pitch in here. First things first, you know it all. You've written about it. It's some fantastic work of yours, too. Is Nick Nurse better as a coach or better as a player, in your opinion?
You know what? He's a great coach. I give him that. But I think that Nick Nurse is a better athlete, all-around athlete than we all give him credit for, right? I mean, think about this. Nick Nurse in high school, he was an all-state quarterback. He holds the school record in the pole vault for track and field. He was an all-state baseball player. He was a shortstop, but he was also he never lost a game as a pitcher. In addition to that, he was an all-state point guard who led them to the state championship and in the largest classification. And when you go to college, he still holds the three-point percentage record at University of Northern Iowa. And in addition to that, his games of 27 consecutive threes is still a school record. So, you know what? He's a hell of a coach. He won on every level, so I'm going to have to give him the nod and say that he's a better coach. But at the same time, you look at him and you realize he's a way better athlete than we give him credit for being. And I need to add this too. He was also a champion junior golfer. So yeah, he was a heck of an athlete. I give him that.
You got to tip your hat to Nick Nurse because that is not easy to do. He must have been busy at all times. But it's so interesting because, I get an opportunity, and I'm sure you have as well, to cover a lot of high school athletes that eventually go to college and then some make it to the pros. And when you talk to a lot of these colleges, they always say, well, we love athletes that play different sports in high school because they just understand a lot of different things about athletics as a whole to be able to bring that college level. So they could be committing for football or basketball, but they love when they play football, basketball, lacrosse, and all three sports at all one time. And it's interesting to me, and I only bring that up because Nick Nurse talks about high IQ of players. His IQ has to be off the charts. And it's not only just because he's done all of these sports, but just the lessons you learn, how you prepare your body, how you do certain things. And that's the knowledge that he's able to give to so many different players. He's been doing this for such a long time, and not just in basketball, in so many different things. I mean, to me, it's impressive. I'm going to go with a player nod too. I think that's great. We're not saying Nick Nurse is not a great coach either, but that's a pretty impressive resume too.
Yeah, it is. And then we talk about high IQ. Here's a guy who has his PhD, right? We talk about, here's a guy who, is really, really good at playing the piano. He plays the guitar, he sings, he does a lot of different things. The one thing that I failed to mention is that, he also had a role in the school play, Oklahoma, right? So, this guy is extremely well-rounded, and I think you need to be, and for him, he came up in the era where it was encouraged to do multiple sports, right? Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's kind of like, hey, if you're in the 9th grade, they tend to tell you, hey, you need to pick and choose a sport and just go on with that. But he had the luxury of doing a lot of different things. But the thing about that is, in addition to, being a heck of an athlete, the team is here in Iowa. This is a place that's special to his heart. Matter of fact, the team had practice today. And what they did is after practice, they hopped on a bus. Not everyone, but they hopped on 2 chartered buses, drove 90 plus miles or rode 90 plus miles to Nick Nurse's golf course in his hometown of Carroll, played 9 holes of golf, then had dinner at his restaurant at the golf course, and then turned around and came back and got getting ready to get a good night's sleep so they could play in the game tomorrow. So, he means a lot to this community and to the state as a whole. So, Nick Nurse is the man around here, definitely the guy.
And I also think it's so important when you have a leader in somebody like Nick Nurse, because yes, all of these NBA players, they're adults. Some of them have families and they do their own thing, right? But when you see somebody like Nick Nurse that's connected in his community, that has done so much, that has done fantastic things throughout his high school, college, and now, professional career as well, it has to make these players just want to be better people overall and want to be able to all come together. And listen, I know people say all the time, well, you put KD, Steph, and Clay on the court and they're going to win. We've seen it happen, right? But team chemistry is also a thing. We saw it last year with the New York Knicks and a team that was just really together. A lot of former Villanova players coming in, playing together. And I bring that up because Nick Nurse is showing that togetherness. He's having an opportunity for some of those guys to be shown of where he's from and that golf course. And that's something that you want as a leader. It's not all just about how to put a ball through a hoop, but what's going to connect you guys? What's going to connect that locker room? Because guess what? It's really easy to connect people when you're winning and everything's good. But when you're losing and things aren't going good, what's going to be that sole centerpiece? And Nick Nurse, through how much life he has lived and what he's been able to do, he is that guy. It's a fantastic story, Keith. And I love it. I mean, when you have coaches that were former really good athletes and now we're having the conversation, is he a better coach than a player? It's really cool to see. Once again, hats off to Nick Nurse, but he definitely has some fantastic stories, fantastic IQ, and might be the most decorated coach in the NBA from that point of view.
Yeah, I'll say that. Yeah, he might be. And the thing is, like you said, I think the thing about Nick, because Nick wasn't a player in the league, in the NBA. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was definitely a good player, but since he wasn't a player in the NBA, we tend to, not acknowledge these guys as if, they know what they, or as well, not acknowledge them, or we just don't give them the credit that they deserve, right? And when you think of him as a person, and you think that at one particular time he was the youngest head coach in NCAA basketball at one time. I mean, he was coaching, he was a head coach at the age of 23. And then you think about how he goes over to Europe and he wins 2 championships there. He wins 2 championships in the G League, formerly known as the D League. And then he gets an NBA championship his first year as a coach. I mean, that's phenomenal. So I feel like that even though he is right now ranked the second best coach in the NBA behind Eric Spoelstra, that he's still underrated, if that makes sense to you. I mean, because I feel like he could get more recognition and could be acknowledged more than others. But at the same time, he didn't play, so a lot of people, they question him. They question his out of the box stuff. But at the same time, it's working.
It is working, and Nick Nurse trying not to have anybody question him anymore and really just get this team together. Excited to see what he has in mind for Paul George stepping out on the court for the first time as the Philadelphia 76ers. So if I'm ever tired or complaining, I'm just going to remember that Nick Nurse did all of that. And then I'll be good and say that I need to step my game up even more, because Nick Nurse, definitely a very decorated person overall, a decorated athlete, and of course, a decorated coach. But the Sixers are just getting ready to play their second preseason game of the preseason, and Paul George making his first debut out there as a Philadelphia 76er. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in and making Locked On Sixers your first listen today. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NBA, where the local experts keep you updated on daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And more you can listen to. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Become a fantasy basketball expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Josh Lloyd. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Sixers tonight.